Welcome to the lecture, talking about the second half of Chapter 6 of the APA Manual and addressing some of the things in Chapter 7. Which Chapter 7 really is mostly examples of things we'll be talking about. But we'll be talking about the reference page. So a couple of things. One, the importance of completeness. So why are there so many reasons and so many rules, so many guidelines about how to cite sources and how to report your references? Well, it's because verifiability is hugely important in science. Um, People need to be able to, if they question what you're saying, you cite something in a paper, and like, well, that doesn't sound right. Did somebody really find that? They need to be able to go down, track down that study, find it, read it, conclude for themselves if you represented what that article said correctly or not. So it's very important that you include enough information that people can find the sources that you're citing. Okay. A couple of kind of basic style things. The title of this section, this page, is references. It's centered at the top of the page. Pretty straightforward. Not bibliography or anything else like that you might do at a different class. APA style is just references. Use a hanging indent, which you can look at examples in the manual for exactly what that looks like. And you don't have to worry about it having exact spacing, the exact size of the indent, but just so that the first part of the reference is flush left, and then anything that's on the next line, if there is anything on the next line, and any lines following it for that particular reference are indented. It's double spaced, just like everything else on paper, and you don't add an extra space between sources. So you just type one source right after the other and double space the entire page, just like you do the whole document. So you don't have to return any extra times or anything like that. Okay, in terms of the order that references appear in the reference list, kind of the general rule is alphabetical. Alphabetical by the author's surname, the first author's surname. And then kind of after the alphabetical rule, a chronological rule kicks in, so that if you have two works by the same author, but at different years, well, they're already in alphabetical order, no matter which one you put first. So then you put them in chronological order. So if you have more than one entry by the same author, those entries among that kind of group for that author are in chronological order. So, for example, if you had two articles written by Herbert Bryant, one in 03 and one in 09, the 03 one would come before or above the 2009 one. Right? If you have same first author but different other authors, so maybe Bryant wrote an article and then Bryant is the first author in another paper, but had some other co-authors in the paper, or Bryant and one co-author wrote a paper and then Bryant another co-author wrote another paper. How do you order that? Well, the rule is alphabetical first, and then chronological if there's any kind of repeating. So here, Bryant 2009 comes first, because in the rule of alphabetizing, nothing comes before something. So Bryant alone comes before any articles that have Bryant with other authors, regardless of what the year is. So Bryant comes first, and then we have Bryant and Neal and Bryant and Perkins. And it's the same Bryant, so you don't know which one comes first. And you don't go to chronological here yet, because you have other authors to look at. So the alphabetical rule is still in place. So you then go and look at the next author in the list, and you order by alphabetically by that. So Neal N comes before P and Perkins in the alphabet, so Bryant and Neal precedes Bryant and Perkins, even though the Bryant and Perkins article came a year earlier. If Bryant was really prolific and you really loved his work, you might have Bryant 09, Bryant and Neal 03, Bryant and Perkins 02, and then another article by Bryant and Perkins. If you had another article by Bryant and Perkins, so it's the same thing, we have exact same authors, then to determine which of those two articles comes first, you then go to chronological order. Okay, so alphabetical first. When the names are exactly the same, we move on to chronological. What about if you have the same author and year? Well, then you go to the next piece of information, which is the title, and you put them in alphabetical order by title. And when you list them in the reference page, and when you set them parenthetically, you include a lowercase letter after the year. So, if you had two articles by Bryant in 2009, one would be 2009A, and one would be 2009B. And you figure out which one comes first by going to the title, and after skipping past any kind of words like a, an, or the, go to the first major word, and whatever letter it begins with, whichever one comes first. That one is A, that one is the A article, the first one, the other one is the B. And if you are citing this parenthetically earlier in the paper, you use, these small letters after the years there as well to help the reader know which article it came from. Okay. Okay, now let's talk about some of the typical components of a reference citation. Well, typically you're going to have an author or some authors, and the information you'll include about the author will be the author's surname followed by their initial or initials. If the article tells you their first name and middle name, or first and middle initial, cite them both. Cite all the information you have. If they only give one name, or they only give one initial, cite that. But they'll always give at least, usually, I should say always, they usually give at least a first name or first initial. So surname followed by initial. In terms of if you have multiple authors, well, how do I know what order to put them in? The order that they're presented in the source, going from top to bottom, left to right on the article itself. And if you're unsure, usually you can find that article cited somewhere else, and they'll have figured out and put it in the right order as well. When you have more than one author, two or more, in the reference section, use an ampersand, not the word "and," to separate the last author from the previous ones. If there's no author, then the title goes in place of the author name, before where the date would typically be. If it's, you might have an editor. You don't always need to cite an editor. Like if you're talking about a journal article, even though there's an editor of the journal, you don't cite the editor. This is really only for books and monographs. And the typical things would be books and book chapters. So if you're citing an edited book and you're not citing one part of the book, a chapter thing, but the entire book, which would probably be rare. You'd have the editor's names in place of where you typically think of the author or author's names. And the only difference is after the name or names, you would have eds period inside parentheses if there's more than one, or just parentheses ed period after the name before the year. So example, if Bryant was editor, Bryant H period parentheses ed period close parentheses. More commonly, it'll be a chapter in an edited book. In this case, the chapter authors go first, just like you would for a journal article. You're comfortable with that. So you have the chapter authors, the title of the chapter, and then after that, you're going to have the editor's names. And it's a little different for whatever reason. You don't invert the names. You don't put the surname first, and then you also add the word "in" before it. So it's example here, in H. Bryant, which is the editor, and then the title of the book. Typically the initial would follow the name, but not when you're talking about the editors in citing a book from which you're citing a chapter. Okay, it's strange, but that's the rules. Okay, so authors of the chapter, title of the chapter, in H. Bryant, editor, title of the book, and then the rest of the information we'll talk about in just a second. Some of which may include, not after that, but earlier on, sorry, you have the publication date, right after the authors. For a journal or book, you cite just the year. For journals, it's because by giving the volume number, really specify when in that year it was published. That's enough specific information. And for books, it just doesn't be relevant. The day or month. People don't publish books that frequently, so year is acceptable. For a magazine, newsletter, newspaper, blog, most other stuff that's not a journal or a book, you cite the year, comma, the month written out, and the day. So 2009, comma, September spelled out as a word, 30, 30 as a numeral for the day. The only thing you might run across is if you're publishing, if you're citing a paper or a poster presentation that was presented at a meeting. In those instances, you give year, comma, month, but not the day, and it's the year and the month of the meeting. And part of it is because the papers, if there's a poster at a meeting, it might be up for a couple of days. You don't have to cite all that, so you can kind of get the general idea if you cite the year and the month that the meeting took place. Other components, the title. I'm talking about the title of an article or book chapter. You'll capitalize just the first word, which is different than most of us were taught in kind of English class. AP style is a little weird there. So just capitalize the first word. Of course, any other proper nouns that are there, capitalize those, but not anything else. You don't italicize the title of the article or the title of a chapter. For the title of a journal or book, which usually comes after the title of the article or chapter, you similarly just capitalize the first word and then any other common nouns. But then a difference would be you do italicize the title of journals and books. Okay, so slight difference there. In terms of other publication information, for journal articles, you'll want to cite the volume number and italicize the volume number. Remember, and the title of the journal will be italicized, so as soon as you start typing the title of the journal, it's italicized, comma, which is still unitalicized, volume number, still italicized, and then the next comma, not italicized, although I probably can't tell, and most of the people wouldn't be able to tell if that last comma was italicized or not, so don't really worry about that, but do italicize the volume number. And then you may or may not have an issue number. If you do, it follows the volume number in parentheses, and you include it if that journal is paginated separately by issue. And what that means by paginated separately by issue is a fancy way of saying that for each issue, it starts over. Each issue starts at page 1. So for volume 27, if there are 4 issues in volume 27, the first issue of volume 27 is pages 1 through 30. The second issue is pages 1 through whatever, which is kind of an old school way of doing things. You don't see that much anymore. And for that reason, when you see citations, frequently they won't have issue numbers. Because now, even if they have 4 issues in one volume, whatever page issue 1 ended on, let's say that issue 1 was pages 1 through 30, then issue 2 would start at page 31. So you don't need to cite the issue for those things. But you may have to track down the journal if you're uncertain. But generally, you can tell by looking at how other people have cited it. In terms of page numbers, comes after the issue if you have it. Otherwise, after the volume number, so volume number, comma, and then the page numbers, which aren't italicized. And for journal articles, you don't put PP period. It's just whatever page it began on. Page 33 to page 47, 33-47 period, and that's it. For book chapters, things a little different. The page numbers here, for some reason, now you put the page numbers inside parentheses and you include the abbreviation PP. So parentheses, PP period space 32 through -47, close parentheses. So a little different for books and journal articles. The other thing that you'll include for books and not journal articles would be location information and publisher information. So the location is where it was published. So we do that by city, comma, state, with the state being using the U.S. Abbreviation, so TX for Texas and Y for New York State, and then a colon, one space, and the name of the publisher. So pretty basic stuff there. Some kind of newer stuff in terms of identifying the source of information, the locator information, including a DOI, Digital Object Identifier, is a fairly new thing. And you want to do that for any articles that you find in an electronic journal. If it's a fully online journal, you want to cite the DOI. Also for articles from paper-based journals that are in electronic form. There are a lot of journals that still have paper-based things that they will send to you if you're a member of the organization, like the Journal of Clinical and Consulting Psychology. You can get a paper journal, they send to you in the mail, and you can touch it and feel it. But they also have an electronic format of that where you access off PsycInfo and it's PDF, right? So for that, if you read the PDF, you should also cite the DOI. So then the question is, well, what if I actually have the paper-based article? So I got the journal in the mail, I read the article, I didn't find it online, it's not a digital object. Technically, you don't need to include a DOI for this, but APA recommends that you do if one exists. And for almost everything now, they do exist. So go ahead and put a DOI for anything and everything. Okay. URL, so kind of web address stuff, not needed if a DOI is listed. Okay, and this is something that I see a lot of people doing, and I think some professors are confused about. If you include a DOI, you don't need to put found at psycinfo.edu, whatever that web address is. The DOI is sufficient. We don't need to know what database you got from, according to the current manual. Okay. But if other professors tell you to do it, go ahead and do it in their classes. I won't take off points if you do it, but you don't have to do that. So if you have a DOI, it's sufficient. You don't need a URL. The times when you won't have a DOI are mostly for non-empirical articles, right? If you're citing something off, an online newspaper magazine from LA Times, may not have a DOI. So in that case, you'll want to provide the URL. Or if there's maybe some government report that doesn't have a DOI and it's just on some government website, you provide the URL so other people can go and find the thing you read. Right? So when you cite a URL, they can frequently be quite long, and you cut and paste them. And when they're long and you're using Word wraps text, so frequently if it's near the end of the line, it'll move the whole thing down to the next line, make your spacing look all funky. So you do break a long URL. If it goes to the end of the line and then wraps around, you go ahead and make it wrap. So you break it by putting your cursor at the end of the line somewhere and hitting the space bar, right, to make one line part of the URL go down to the next line, and you put that break before a punctuation mark. Example here. There it is. So this is one long URL, and I spaced right after the T in content. There was no space there, and if I didn't space, the whole thing would be moved down to the next line. So I spaced there because there's a hyphen following it. So break it yourself at the before a punctuation mark. So that's about it for all the reference components. And Chapter 7, I won't go over in detail because mostly that's just examples of the different things you could look up. But you should just know that almost everything you could think of, any source of information, it has an example that tells you how to cite it. From blogs, conversations with a professor, there's a way to cite that. Government reports with no author, when you have no date, an email you got from somebody. So if you're struggling with, well, this is kind of a weird thing, it's not a journal article, it's not a chapter, I'll just put down some stuff. Don't do that. Look through the manual, try to find an example. If you have problems finding that, let me know, and I'll try to help you figure out the best way to cite whatever kind of unique thing you're trying to cite. Okay? Good luck.